Hey everybody, this is Dustin from Tech for Humans. Today we're going to be talking about DDO. Now we're starting off in Blender because in order to use DDO, you actually need a 3D model with at least a normal map. Now this normal map should be baked down from a high poly to a low poly model, and that's what we're generating here. We're building ourselves, well, we're making a brick. We just need some kind of model to demonstrate on, and I prefer to build something custom rather than grab something off the internet. Now, what's really important here is you need a lot of detail. Now, I'm going to be working with 2K textures. I'm going to be working with an ambient occlusion map and a normal map. Again, these must be baked from a high-res model to a low-res model. So if you don't know how to do that, you're going to need to find out. And if people need it, I'll probably make a video about that, how to do that in Blender, because it's super easy to do. That being said, you want to make sure that you have a couple of detail passes. You need to make sure that you have, initial detail pass where you're blocking out the shape of the model. You need to make sure that you have a middle detail pass where you're giving it some, scratches, dents, divots, wear and tear. And then you need to make sure that it has surface detail across the whole thing. Other than that, once you've baked out your ambient occlusion and your normal map, you should be good to go. So with that being said, we're going to move over to Photoshop and the Quixel 2.0 suite. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop. You'll notice that we have the Quixel suite fired up. We have Endo, DDO, and 3Do. And remember, this is technically a separate application. It looks like it's part of Photoshop, but really, for all intents and purposes, it's not. It does, however, interface with Photoshop. So what we're going to do is we're going to be using DDO today, as well as 3Do to help visualize. And we're going to be observing what's happening in our layer panel, but largely we're not interacting with our layer panel. So, that being said, let's fire up DDO. Alright, now this is the main DDO interface for importing your meshes and your normal and your ambient occlusion. Now, it's the dead minimum is a normal map. The ambient occlusion is optional, but since we have it, let's use it. So what we're going to do is we're going to first import our mesh. And here it is, right in my folder here. And you'll notice that it is an OBJ file. It's a standard file. It takes DEs, 3DSs, FBXs, 3D Studio Max files, and, believe it or not, blend files. But we're going to leave it just as an OBJ file for right now. Let's go ahead and import that. All right. So our mesh is imported. We're now going to import our normal map and our ambient occlusion map. Now, it may take a second for these to import. These are, in this case, these are fairly large files. These are like 2K files. Now, we're also going to let 3Do bake in our curvature map. We don't need object space normals or the position gradient or anything like that. We'll just leave all that alone. But the curvature really will help, so we'll just leave that checked here, and it'll automatically bake it for us. It's like magic. Export target is going to be Unity 5, and we're going to leave the rest of this pretty much just alone, because it's just basically perfect as is. Right? So we'll go ahead and hit Create. Now, DDO will start processing all of your information. It'll be opening 3Do in the background. And as you can see, it's going to start baking out our curvature map. And any other maps it thinks we need. A little more processing, a little more processing. This is completely normal. Now, if it's hanging a lot, you might have a problem. Your computer might not be beefy enough. But otherwise, this shouldn't take more than a minute. Alright, and okay, let's get started. Alright, now none of this is particularly useful. You'll notice that it's actually opened up a whole bunch of what are essentially blank documents. And that's because right now it's not actually generating any textures right now. So let's open up, let's go ahead and click on our albedo right here. And all these buttons are pretty simple. We've got our albedo, gloss, metalness, and our normal map, which represents each one of these files. So it's all kind of like tucked right inside of this panel here. We have the ability to open the exporter. This is for when we are finished with all of our maps. Re-import, if we want to re-import the maps that we're working with, as well as saving custom presets and the like. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to go down here to add material. This is functionally adding layers over here in our layer palette. Right now this is just our color with our mask and it's blank. So we'll just go ahead and go add material. This will bring up the material library. Now, this library is extensive, but by no means exhaustive. It has a fair amount of materials, and these are excellent starting points. But really, the magic is in mixing and matching these. These would replace or augment a traditional texture library. And it works well because they're scanned on a bunch of different PBR levels. So to make this nice and easy, what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to start with a very clean concrete. Now, we're working with a brick, but we are starting with basic stone, and we're looking for the texture quality. I think this is a good place to start. So let's double click that, and DDO will process. All right, here we go. Okay, now this right here gives us a decent brick texture. Now let's take a look at what this looks like in 3D. Initializing. All right. Now the controls for 3D are pretty simple. It's like Maya, you just hold down Alt and right click. And not bad. It's got a little faceting where I had some faceting, but otherwise this is actually a really good bake so far. So that's looking really good. Now what I want to do is I want to change the basic color of this first, because I want it to look like a, reddish brick. And right now it's kind of like tan, and I'm not digging that at all. So let's go ahead and look over here. Now there's a couple components here. Here's our basic material that we're drawing out of our library. Here's our mask, and here is our base color. Now this roughly equates to, over here, our base color and our mask, right? All that together gives us this particular setup, and our pattern overlay is our material itself. This is not bypassing Photoshop's processes, this is specializing Photoshop's processes when you get down to it. So let's go ahead and click on the color. It's also called our reflectance. And this brings up our color picker dialog box. I'm going to just go ahead and shift this more towards the red. I'm going to really saturate it a bit more. Hit OK, just kind of get a look at what that looks like. Not bad, actually. Quite pleased with how that turned out. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually add another material. I want this to be kind of a gritty, grimy texture. And so I want to add in a little bit of oil, essentially. Now there is a preset for this. It's this wonderful oil accumulated mechanical grease. We're just going to go ahead and double click that. Now that spreads it all across the top, which is okay. It gives me a sense of what this will look like if it was covered in an accumulated grit. But that may not be what I want it to look like overall. So I'm actually going to shift this down, like so. There we go. Took me a second. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a mask between these two layers, because if you look over here in the layers panel, our brick is on top, our oil is on the bottom. So what we need to do is actually create a mask between these. Now, I don't need to affect the oil mask. I actually just need to affect brick over top of it. So we're going to go ahead and click Edit Dynamask. It's going to give us the option of, do you want to paint in full shaded mode? For right now, let's go ahead and say no. So what this does is it brings up a handy dandy little dialog box like this one. And this is the different types of masks that it can use based on our ambient occlusion and our normal map. So for instance, I could go with full curves, which would take the normal map and essentially apply a nice even area. And I'm going to have white wherever I want full effect or full transparency, full non-transparency, and then black wherever I want it to be somewhat more transparent. So to augment this, I'm actually going to go ahead and do a little bit of painting on this surface because I feel like this is pretty good. But I want to tweak it right before I paint it. So down here at the bottom, there's some options that allow us to adjust some of these settings. Right? This allows us to affect the tightness, the overall contrast. Right? You getting an idea of how this works? Now this right here will show through a lot of that grease and grit. That's not what I want. So I'm just going to go ahead and decrease the tightness overall and bring down the curvature a little bit. Right? Now I'm just going to put that right back up. Nice and bright. We'll leave it there. We're going to go in and customize this by going up here to painting. You'll see I have my brush selected. I'm going to select my brush types. I'm going to go with one of the many different types of brush tips. I'm going to go with probably, I think this one here. I think this is a pretty good brush for what I want to do. And that should be just fine. Now, I'm going to increase the size of this a little bit. And I want you to get a look at what's going to happen here. As I switch over to my tablet, I have pen pressure available. But over here is the overall paint opacity. This is how thick of an effect I'm putting on. And this is the actual color. So this is really just a mask mode. So in this case, I want to have my black on. And I'm going to have a relatively low opacity. I'm just going to build up these corners here. Right? I'm painting in the corners, and I'm not trying to hit the bottom. I'm trying to hit the full edge itself. Right? Everywhere that you would expect oil and grit and grime to accumulate. Okay. Doing good. Just plug this in right here. Oops. Now, it is a little bit odd, but you do have the ability to erase just what you're painting, right? Nothing more. Just switch between your brush and your regular mode. Looks good. Pretty satisfied with that. We're just going to go ahead and accept that as our mask. And right away, in these creases here, we have more of that dirt, grit, and grime. Now, I want to edit that because I feel like it could be actually a little stronger. So in this case, I'm going to say, when it says, would you like to paint in full shaded mode? I'm going to go click yes. Right? And this will allow me to get a look at what it will look like directly in this masking mode. Right? So in this case, I'm going to just bring that all the way up. I'm going to go down with a much smaller brush. I'm just going to hit up these areas with full darkness. Just get that grit and grime in there. Right? I'm just painting that oil directly in there. Right? Just looking to augment some of these areas where we know it's going to be a little bit dirty. I didn't like that. If we overspill a little bit, that's okay. We can just go back in with our eraser. You can use shortcut E key for that. Erase. And the B key puts you back to brush. Okay. So that's looking good. Now, this is overall, we're going to hit accept mask. Now this is looking good, but in my opinion, a little drab. Being a miniature painter myself, I'm used to seeing little highlights on raised edges to kind of, replicate a little bit of dry brushing. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new material. We're actually going to add a roughed up concrete a little bit. This is just to get a little bit of texture, I think. Right. Let's hit, no, we'll just go with regular clean concrete. I want to show an important principle here. clean concrete. This is just above. It has no mask. So again, we're back to that weird color, right? And here I'm going to just go in and pick a bright, vivid orange color, right? We're pushing just towards just straight up orange. And that is, I mean, that looks terrible. Like, I would not want that for my finished brick, but we're going to go ahead and add that mask. And I am going to want to paint in our full shaded mode. Okay, so here I'm going to say I want just a touch. Well, we'll do my full curves again. I think that's a good starting place, right? Now right away, we get that nice, tight highlights here, right along the corners, right where our edges are, right where that curvature is. And that's looking really good. What I want to do is I want to just increase that accuracy a little bit more, right? I'm going to bring that contrast up. Right? See? So this thing now is covered in this kind of grimy, gritty texture, and you know, it's highlighted really well. It looks really nice. But I'm just going to affect my base color of my mid-tone just a little bit. Increase that brightness just a little bit. There we go. That's looking a lot more like a regular old brick. That's looking real good. Now, this mask itself, I'm not very happy with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and try a few other options. And let's just do some experimenting so that we've done this on camera. I am going to want to paint in regular color mode. And I'm going to not keep my edits, right? Because this is good, but I think it could be better. And, oh, hang on. Deleted my mask. Need to fix that. There we go. Yes. Crash. Alright, little technical snafu there. We're going to go ahead and we're going to select our other mask. And we're going to go ahead and leave all this alone. Right? We're just going to go in and adjust this just a bit. Alright. We're going to mess with a few of these. Let's go and try sand. Let's see how that looks. And that looks pretty good. Right? Have a nice little cavity mask. Let's try cavity soot. Ooh, that's intense. Maybe a little too intense. Let's go for big soot. Ooh, still intense. Alright. Let's go light edge scratches. Still not feeling it. Edge tarnish. Alright, now that's not a bad one. So you can also invert these masks, which is something I haven't really mentioned yet, but I think is really kind of awesome, personally. Alright, so let's do that. We'll accept the mask. That process is wonderful. Now that brick is pretty much good to go. I mean, like, there are other things that I could do to this, and they would look good, but I don't think that I really need to. So that being said, it's just now a matter of going in and adjusting a little bit of our glossiness as necessary. So I'll just go ahead and select, just hit cancel there, bring this down. It doesn't need to be that glossy, it's brick. That's looking pretty good. A little shiny on the edges, that's alright. Bring that down. Not bad. Not bad at all. And then my soot, I'm going to just adjust that glossiness as well. Just bring that nice and low. There we go. Now that's looking great. That's looking real great. All right, guys, I think that's going to largely wrap it up for here. This is mainly about how to use DDO. Now, you can obviously go in and open up the exporter. I think that's largely self-explanatory. You've got naming conventions, file types, setting the path. Really, really super simple, so I'm not going to delve into that. But that is basically how you use DDO. Remember, it does require a detailed normal map baked down to a low poly object, as well as a helpful but not necessary ambient occlusion map. But this lets you put a lot of the detail from the texturing into the sculpt, and instead of having to do all this manually in Photoshop. Remember, DDO does not bypass what Photoshop does. It just specializes Photoshop. Everything that we've done over in DDO happens inside of Photoshop. These are just scripts that are running. Now, you could, in theory, do all this on your own. This is just a traditional texturing method that you can use. However, this is a huge time saver. Getting from point A to point B is so much faster with DDO. I cannot tell you how much I recommend using this above and beyond, just Photoshop by itself. As much as I love texturing in Photoshop, this has really been giving me better results. So thank you very much. Again, this is Dustin with Tech for Humans. Appreciate it. If you like this video, leave a like. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe. And if you have any recommendations, questions, or comments, please leave a comment down in the comment section below. Thank you very much.